Welcome into episode 6 of the National Rundown. As always, I'm your host, Brady Locke, joined alongside Geono Alosio. And this week, again, it is another action-packed week, but there's a lot to air out and a lot to be excited for. We have so much to look forward to, but there is also so much that we need to talk about from this past week. Geono, it was a crazy week in the CBL, and there's a lot of exciting news for the CFL. So what are you excited for going forward into this episode?
For sure. Well, obviously, we got a lot of stuff to break down about the CBL, but also there's a lot of cool stuff with the CFL coming up. Obviously, we got the kickoff opening on Thursday, June 4th. And then also, we're going to have to get into some power rankings and some debates and some of our MOP picks, and also get into all that happy stuff that I know everybody's going to be happy to see. As well, there's also going to be a lot of cool stuff for me and Brady to kind of bite our tongue and, accept that our hot takes were not as good as we probably hope. But, there's a lot of great stuff coming down the week, and it was definitely a great week for watching basketball and, a little bit of Canadian football preseason action.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. And yeah, as you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of eating my words this episode and a lot of probably eating your words as well. So let's, get right into it and get rid of it as fast as we possibly can. But we'll start off with the national pulse, putting our finger right on that pulse, going coast to coast, seeing what's going on around Canada. So Geono, as always, What is going on in the West?
Well, man, there's been a lot of stuff, and we're going to break into it in not too long here about, what exactly happened in the West this week for the CBL. But I can tell you one thing, man. Vancouver is starting to come out. They're 5-1. Winnipeg is 3-3. Edmonton is 2-3, and then the Mamba are 2-4. We've been on them a little bit, but they're kind of heating up, and maybe that's something we'll talk about. But there's also the Calgary Surge sitting 0-5. Man, there was a lot of really good games there, especially that one between Edmonton and Calgary and Red Deer on Sunday night. A Battle of Alberta in Red Deer. Can't really get that much better. Obviously, the Stingers leave that with a happy win. They've had some new additions there. So honestly, the West is shaking up to be absolute crazy. There's no real way to stack up 1 through 4. I really think it's going to be a dogfight all the way to the end. But man, the West of the CBL was absolutely on fire. And then obviously the CFL had some of their preseason games. BC Winnipeg played. BC came away 30-19 as the winners, and then Edmonton and Calgary played. Funny enough, the Friday before the Sunday night Edmonton Stingers game, and man, Calgary just beat them 21-18. It was a great game, but obviously some weather issues that delayed the kickoff. But overall, honestly, a pretty good week out west for the CFL and the CBL.
Yeah, no, great stuff, and I think the West is really, very enticing, and we're going to get into that later. But like you mentioned, Vancouver and Calgary, 2 teams that we thought would be really close, have just a huge gap this far in the season. But going out east, there's a lot to talk about and a lot that I really want to talk about, because starting off in Scarborough, the team that I am really high on, if you know me and if you know my take last week, I said that they were going to go 8-0 to start the season, and unfortunately that got cut off at their 4-0 mark, because they then lost to the Saskatoon Mamba this week in a nail-biter, another 2-point game, but a 2-point loss for them, so they are no longer undefeated, and, the Mamba have 2 wins, so looking at last week, how could we ever predicted that? We really couldn't have, but Scarborough, I'll get it more into that later, but just know I'm not too happy about it. Looking at Ottawa, though, I'm really happy that they did get another win here against Montreal. They would have been 2-4 and had lost 2 games this season to Montreal if they would have lost the game, but thankfully they came away with that. They're now 3-3 on the season, and they are 3rd in that East, so they're becoming a little bit more of a threat like I thought they would be, but again, I think that was a very pivotal win for them. I'll get into that again later on. For Montreal, at 2-4, they're sitting at the bottom of that East now. So they're really struggling to find their identity, and so is Niagara. I feel they're 2-3 as well. So they're both sitting at the bottom, and I think we need to talk about what their identity is going forward for sure. But then again, at the top, you have Brampton sitting 5-1. They did beat the Sea Bears this week. That was last Monday. We had talked about that game as going to be a really good one, and they really did come out on top there. But again, top of the East, there's not much we can say, but it's really exciting stuff for Brampton. And I think Mark Cuban was actually at the game the other day, so that was really good for them. Really exciting stuff, and I think there's nothing but good things going forward for Brampton, for sure. And then in the CFL action, preseason week 3 wrapped up. You had Hamilton coming out on top of Toronto, and then Ottawa actually beating Montreal 27-3, which is pretty exciting for them. But again, preseason, not much to really look into. But again, we look forward to week 1. This week, we'll have Montreal coming to Hamilton in a really big game to really, start off the season right, see what Hamilton's got, and see what Montreal's got. I'm looking forward to see how Davis Alexander and those Alouettes really start off their season. But then again, we'll have Edmonton coming into Ottawa, which could be an interesting matchup. Edmonton should take care of business, but we will see. Super exciting. Lots going on in the East. Lots going on all around Canada. But that is your national pulse for the week. Geono, what do you think about the East so far this week? Was there anything that jumped out to you the most?
Yeah, I think, for the thing that jumped out to me the most, it was the CFL preseason. Obviously, Ottawa and Montreal, preseason football, you don't want to dive too deep into things, but I was really shocked at the difference between Ottawa and Montreal. And again, these are very, depth chart type games, right? Where you try to figure out where guys kind of are fitting out. Like, these aren't where starters come out and dominate. Yeah. But I gotta say, that was just, I expected something a little bit better from Montreal. I'm a little bit higher on, Ottawa's depth than probably a lot of people are. I seen the other day that Jake Maier is going to be the starting quarterback. We'll see how that goes. I definitely think that's something we can talk about when the season gets going, especially if it's not turning out so well, or if it does turn out to be a really good pick. We don't know, but Ryan Didwin seems to think it's a good pick. So for me, that was probably the biggest thing. But also, I do think that there was something to say, about Brampton, losing one game and then Winnipeg kind of going on a little bit of a slide. I think that was a little bit interesting. I will say, though, we took some L's on our hot takes, but I will say this. I mentioned that game was going to be decided by 3 or 4 points, and I think it was decided by 3 or 4 points. Yeah. So honestly, we're going to be able to take that win and we're going to rock with it, man. We just got to be able to take something. We took some L's on the hot takes, but it's easy to take a win and just be able to salvage something from the week.
Yeah, we'll take our small victories, but I think we definitely need to talk about those big L's we took this week.
We do.
Talk about our own and talk about each other's. I think there's a lot to discuss there. So I'll start with mine. Let's get our thoughts on the Scarborough take. I'll start, obviously. I'm really pretty upset that we didn't come away with that win in Saskatoon. I really thought that was the freest game of the 5 that, were the tall task. We got out of Calgary, which was great, and then we come into Saskatoon. And I'll have you know, this was Paw Patrol night in Saskatoon, so they were wearing jerseys with the Paw Patrol characters on them, and this was the game that we lost. So that's just kind of the icing on the cake for me. But really, how is Saskatoon won 2 games for starters? But how are we losing, that close of a game to Saskatoon? Who are they going to in the clutch that we can't match? We have Miles Powell. He's our guy, right? We can ride with him. We should be able to get the job done, and it shouldn't even be close. But in the matter of fact, we lose by 2. I don't know. But the Scarborough team, like I mentioned last week, all of their games are close. They're playing to their opponent, whether their opponent's really good, whether their opponent's really bad. It's always close. And, that might not necessarily be a bad thing, especially when you're playing good teams. But I kind of want to see a convincing victory against one of those worser teams. So I'm very upset. I'm very upset. But I am a little speechless at the same time. So I kind of need a little bit of clarity from you on what you thought about this.
Well, how were you feeling during those games? Like the Calgary game was pretty tight too. I remember I sent you a
Yep.
message being like, "How is Brady feeling?" Because that was a tight game, and I feel like that
That
was
was great.
probably the red flag to be like, "Hey, this might not come through." I know you were probably sweating, right? Like you were
Oh, I was.
probably being like, "This can't end right on the first game." Was that how you
No.
were feeling?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, we we can get through this, thankfully, but I was sweating the whole time. And then we're in the next game against Saskatoon. I look and we're up 10. I'm like, okay, we got this, right? I didn't even really bother watching much of the rest of the game. And then I look again and, we had lost by 2 points. And I'm just
Yeah.
shocked because how in the world did that happen? Really, I really I really don't know. But I was thinking, hey, we get through this game. The next one against Calgary was probably going to be tougher, especially
Yeah.
since we just saw them. I think maybe, with some of the Sean Miller more, blah, 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 they might have had a little bit more to give us, but we didn't even get to that point. So
Yeah.
maybe this could be a little bit of a roller coaster down for Scarborough, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised now. My
Yeah.
confidence on them has dropped
Yeah.
tremendously.
I think that's fair too, right? Like I think that there's probably some rearranging in the East and just the league overall. I feel like we're starting to see that top three kind of emerge and maybe the top four. Obviously, I feel like we're going to have to dive into that next episode because there's definitely been a lot of movement since our
Yeah.
season
Oh
power
yeah. We need
rankings.
to talk about this.
Definitely don't think you're going to put Calgary number one in this one. I think we
Yeah.
can lock that
I think
in.
so.
Otherwise, you know what? It might be time to flame Brady on some of these picks. But we're
Yeah.
gonna kid. We're kidding. Either way, I think getting into like the Mamba, taking down Scarborough. Obviously, I had the Mamba going winless. It's kind of ironic that they were the ones that really ended the win streak for you guys. And obviously,
Yeah, I
they
think they
beat. I
had the
believe they
most
beat.
wins this week as well out of any
They
team.
did. So things
Which
are
is
things are
crazy.
turning up for Saskatoon. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't know. You never can tell, but I mean, obviously, props to the Mamba. For being able to get two wins and stop kind of the slide of going and possibly going 0-6 because now that's kind of flipped to Calgary. But that's a different conversation. The Mamba,
Yeah.
props to them. Being able to pull off two wins against the Scarborough as well is pretty cool. I was saying, I'm like saying to myself, obviously the ability to kind of win in target score time is pretty big. Obviously, that's
Yeah.
the difference maker between good teams and bad teams. So
Exactly.
for me, I would say, props to them. Does this make them a contender? No. I still think they have a long way to go, but
Yeah.
it's encouraging. Like you can't not look at that and say it's not encouraging. So I think you have to give them props. Say, hey, it's encouraging. Will it go anywhere? We'll see. But being able to stack two wins in a row makes me look at them and say, okay, maybe you're not as bad as we may have thought initially,
Yeah.
but I still think they have a long way to go.
Yeah, I don't want to read like too much into the two wins, but again, I think I can kind of confidently say now that it shouldn't be every time they're playing, it's like, maybe it's a free win. I don't know if we can really say that anymore.
Yeah, I
think
don't
they
think we
could
can
be,
either.
you know, a, and I'm not saying they're competitive, but I'm saying it's not like, you can go in here and no, we're just going to bully you the whole game. I don't
Yeah.
think that's the case. But again, like we said last week, or like I said last week, I think even if you're not a great team, without the target score time, you can kind of run it out, manage the game if you somehow get up. But
Yeah.
with the target score, you actually have to go out and win the game. And I didn't think that they could do that. And they did it twice. So for me, I think we kind of have to give them more credit than we were giving them for
Yeah.
sure. So finally,
I
we're
agree.
saying something good about this Mamba team, and that's a victory
Yeah,
for them.
no, I agree 100%, especially when we were talking about them. Obviously, I picked them to go winless. I'll eat my words. Congrats to the Mamba. I don't think, it was going to be a tough one either way to go winless the entire season. It's
Yeah,
pretty tough. Felt like it was going to be a trap game. I think I mentioned that. Obviously, maybe it was. But like you mentioned, Scarborough was kind of playing to their opponents the straight way through.
yeah,
I think for them, I think it's decent when you come to playoff time to know that you've been there and you can do that.
for
But
sure.
at the same time, you don't want to give your heart, your coach heart palpitations at the same time, right? You want to be able to win some games and really cruise to the finish line. So for me, I think that there's some encouraging signs for Scarborough. Obviously, in my opinion, you just take the loss and you move on and you try to rebound. But for me, I think the other interesting thing was my Sea Bears pick, which is getting worse and worse by the day. Immediately between the Sea Bears, they're now 3-3. That championship pick is not looking so good. Was it a little bit bold? I'll admit that it was bold, but I also thought they had a lot of good early season momentum. That,
Yeah.
whenever Xavier Moon comes back, which whenever that will be, it's going to probably elevate them. I feel like they're in that top 4, top 5 conversation for sure. Where does that change, and how does that change when Moon gets back? Obviously, we'll see. But for me, I think that pick is probably turning out to be a little bit worse than my Mamba pick. Just because it's like ever since we've kind of cursed our teams, haven't we? It's like
Yeah,
every
it
time
feels like
we
that.
come out with that, it's like things have just not gone very well. So
Well,
I think for us, it might be time to hang up the hot takes for this episode.
yeah.
We'll revamp next week. We'll come back with some better opinions and some more stuff that we hope actually lands. So yeah, we're gonna take a week off and we're gonna reevaluate ourselves to make sure that we get some good stuff.
Yeah, like honestly, I kind of want to like give you more credit on the Sea Bears. Like I don't know if I think it's still like alive and well. Honestly, like you lose to Brampton by 4 points. Cool, like
Yeah,
that's a tough game. But then the Mamba one hurts for sure.
yeah,
But I think they're still waiting on Moon, and
yeah,
the West doesn't feel that competitive aside from Vancouver. So
yeah.
I think they'll be fine. It's more so it's just gonna come down to playoffs, and hopefully by the time you got Moon and your whole team flowing, I think they can take down that Vancouver team. So we'll see. But yeah, hot takes. Hot takes are gonna take a break for now. For now, but we'll be back with some better ones. But going forward here, I want to get your thoughts on your team, the Stingers. You know, Dane Deja, you were really high on Dane Deja, and now he is gone. What are you kind of feeling about that? They brought some new faces. No update yet on Hornsby, I think you said. So what's Edmonton doing?
Edmonton is going through some changes. Jordan Baker said after the Niagara game on Sunday, May 24th, I believe. That was right before we shot the last podcast. It
Yeah.
was he mentioned something at the very end of the press conference. He was like, "There's going to be some new faces." And I asked him, I'm like, do you have any inclination on who that might be, and if you can tell us? He declined to comment, but it kind of set the stage for it to be like, okay, something's going to happen this week going into that road trip. This road trip for the Stingers was going to be very important to avoid really going into. You could end up 1-6, right? They play 3 games. Now you started off on the right foot, beating your rival. Helps a little bit more. So for me, I looked at this as being a very important road trip for the team. Obviously the new faces stuff was really what I think was the lead up storyline and how they would actually translate.
Yeah.
Dane left like the day after that, or 2 days after
Yeah.
that game. And to be honest with you, I was interviewing him post game. I had no inclination that was going to happen. He seemed very content and very happy with the team. So, take it as it is. But either way, he was a great player for the team. He was a great person as well. Every time he was doing an interview, he was always great. He seems like a really great person. So, obviously, like I said, I've only interviewed him 4 times, so I'm like, I can't speak to him entirely. But you know what? He was a good person, and you could kind of see that on the court. The team loved him. So, he was kind of the offensive engine for the team. How does that change now that he's gone? Isaiah Moore's there, Stanley Davis Jr.'s in, and Scotty Lindsay, the guy who was with Edmonton last year and was kind of that second option, is back. I think I mentioned, where's Scotty Lindsay going to end up on our first episode, and I mentioned maybe Scarborough, but you never know. That's what's so crazy about the CBL.
Yeah.
For me, I think that this comes with a lot of different questions about how is Edmonton going to run. When Dane's gone, obviously we saw that Sunday night. Looked pretty good, but there's also some questions now about, having, I believe, 6 or 7 Americans on the roster, and you can only have 5 on the game day roster. Yeah. If Dane comes back, it may be 8, so it's like you may have a situation where you have like 3 people that need to be out, and I believe there's like Samaj Teal, Audius Tony, and then you think about Trey King, Nick Hornsby's in there. There's some other people that I'm forgetting. Trey King, I believe. I didn't mention him. But obviously there's a lot of people in there that you're like, okay, Samaj Teal has kind of been the starting point guard of this team. You're probably not going to let Nick Hornsby go. And then, you think about, okay, is Trey King going to maybe be on the way out? You don't know. Yeah. But also Isaiah Moore, like, he's an American. He feels like he was probably the Dane replacement. So for me, there's a lot of questions, especially when we think about, okay, who's probably going to be the odd people out there. Everything is going to change when Nick comes back. When Nick Hornsby comes back, everything is going to change for this team.
Oh yeah.
I think that he's going to be probably the offensive engine. Could that maybe change with Samaj Teal, Scotty Lindsay, Isaiah Moore? We don't know, but it kind of felt like just as Edmonton was finding their offensive identity, things just change, right? They have to restart now and find that offensive engine now. So for me, when Nick comes back, there's no update. Could be any time on this road trip. His season in the Indonesian Basketball League is over. So really, it's just a matter of it could happen anytime. When
Yeah.
it does, it'll change the entire conversation for the Stingers. But I think there is something to ask here about, does this lower Edmonton's ceiling? And, obviously I want to get your thoughts on this because
Yeah.
Edmonton, probably was going to be that third team in the West, probably could be the second seed if they really, really, really kind of impressed. But right now, I'm like, you have to reset and find your offensive centerpiece 4 games in, 5 games in. A lot of teams are already starting to get that piece in place, and they started, like you look at Vancouver, right? They look totally different than they did 2 weeks ago. Do you think this lowers Edmonton's ceiling?
Well, I think it does for sure. And I think, as crazy as it sounds, I think I still favor Calgary in that third spot.
Okay.
I think the Sean Miller Moore was huge. I think, relieving some pressure off Evan Gilliard will be amazing.
Yeah.
But, they haven't, again, in the first 2 games with him, they haven't won. But I still think that's fine. And I think now they're going to transition. I think they're going to go on a run. I think they're going to go on a run, get back to 500, hopefully within the next 2-3 weeks. And I think, because I don't think the Stingers are getting, over 500 anytime soon. I don't think the Mamba are getting over 500 anytime soon. I think it's still there for them. So I think for the Stingers, realistically, their ceiling is way lowered. I think they're looking at the 4 seed. But again, it's so wide open still.
Yeah.
Like, as much as their ceiling could be lower, their ceiling could be lowered, I think their floor is also kind of lowered in the sense that, this teams behind them aren't doing great right now.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting. I think they need something, right?
Yeah.
I think if it's Hornsby, that's great, but they need something. And, you thought they found that in Dane Danger, but, unfortunately he had, opportunities elsewhere. So
Yeah.
that's just kind of how the league goes. But
100%.
hopefully they find their footing and they can, maybe squeeze out that third spot. But again, yeah, they're not looking at anything higher than the third spot anyways. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
I can see that side. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I give you my quick thoughts. I think, right now it lowers their ceiling because, to be honest with you, when you add so many new pieces, it's like we just said, like there's so many teams that kind of now who their guy is, and for Edmonton to lose that and have to be back at square one, like it doesn't give you the most confidence. Again, you think about certainty, like so many things can go wrong when you're adding a bunch of new pieces.
Exactly.
From what we saw Sunday, like I think it's just a 1 game sample size, so we can't go out and say, hey, this whole thing's gonna work. But I think you're right. Like right now, it lowers their ceiling, but I also think, long term, I think there's a lot of stuff that they could possibly see, working out and where it could actually raise their ceiling.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm with you. I'm cautious about, overthinking to be like, hey, this team's going to be that second or third seed. I think right now, their ceiling is lowered, but it could improve. I'm very open to that thought, and I think they very well could if they get a bunch of people, the new faces to kind of start integrating into the lineup, and then also when Nick Hornsby comes back. But definitely a lot of weird stuff in the West because so many things happened in the West this week. It was absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's just gonna come down to like the timeline, really. Because if they figure it out and they get their guy fast enough, then it's like, okay, you're gonna be all right. But if records aside, right now, looking at what those bottom 3 teams have, it's Calgary for me by a mile.
Okay.
But again, they got to prove it. So. Really, everything that I've said so far has definitely not really come to fruition, but I think Calgary can pick it up. And honestly, it's crazy to say, but I feel like I have more belief in Calgary this week than I have in past weeks. And we're checking out on the panic meter to talk about Calgary now. I'm not really. I'd probably say I'm at the same level of panic or a little bit less.
Really?
You probably think that this would be the week to panic, but I think taking a little bit of that off of Evan Gilliard. 2 games in, you're still kind of feeling it out. I think now we can kind of hopefully say that they get a win. I'm as much as I'm down on Scarborough now, I'm thinking Calgary's going to go and win this game against them this week. So
Okay.
I'm hoping, let me see, how many games do they have this week? Is it just, if it's just against, yeah, they have the River Lions coming the third, and then it's going to be the sixth is the Scarborough. So those are 2 winnable games. So
Yeah.
if you can get to 2-5 this week, I think that's very much possible. And I think you're then looking at, hey, we're back in this picture a little bit. We got some momentum. Hey.
Yeah.
So it's being very optimist of me, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see.
So you mentioned, Sean Miller Moore, and you mentioned the panic level. You're not panicking about Calgary right now?
I'm not panicking as much as I probably should be.
Okay.
I would say I'm panicking the same amount as I was last week. And last week I was still on the edge, and I don't think I've quite jumped off yet. I think I'm hanging on a little bit, but I think I'll say this: if you don't win both games this week, then I'm off.
Yeah.
But I'm leaning towards that they can win both games this week. So.
Okay.
That's
I can see
why
that.
I'm not too worried. Yeah.
I can see that. I think, Niagara, they don't really have an identity, and we kind of touched on that a little bit. Scarborough, that one's really a toss-up. If you go to 1-6, I mean, to me, I'm I don't know about that. That's where I would be
Yeah, exactly.
You have to win those 2 games if you want to get back into the conversation, right? Especially, I would be right there with you if the Mamba hadn't won their 2 games. If they hadn't won their 2 games and, Calgary and the Mamba were both winless, I would feel more generous about, Calgary's chances. But I'm going to disagree with you on the only part that they have to win 2 games to get back in the conversation. If they go 1-6, I'm panicking. If I'm Calgary, I'm panicking at this point.
No,
but
agreed.
I feel like that's something we're going to figure out. Do you like this roster a little bit more with Sean Miller Moore? Is that kind of why you're leaning a little bit more to it?
Well, I just like the score because originally going into the season, I was very high on the fact that I thought Evan Gilliard could handle the entire scoring and the entire offense for this Calgary team, and I was quite wrong on that. He's gonna need some help. So, unfortunately, they had to bring in somebody else, and I think it's going to really be great for them. So, I think they're just still finding the footing in the first 2 games. But again, there's going to be so much opportunity here. As much as you are 0-5, it's not crazy yet.
Yeah.
I know that's crazy to say still. It's 0-5 sounds so bad.
Yeah.
But 2-5 doesn't sound so bad, does it?
I can agree with you there. Yeah, like we said, I think that's a good
But I
point.
agree with you in the sense that 1-6, yes, that is too deep in. But again, looking at it, right? It's Niagara, Vancouver this week, and then next week they got Mamba. So, I mean, then they have 2 games against Sea Bears after that. That's a little scary. But if we can get to 3-5 by the time we get to the Sea Bears, maybe steal one there. On the optimist side, we're looking at 4-6. So that isn't bad at all, right?
Okay. Yeah. I can see that.
By the time you get to that Mamba game, if you win that game, you should be ahead of them in the standings. You're in 4th.
Okay.
Cool. Stingers probably still in the realm of catching them. We're fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
That's being very optimist, though. I'm saying this as a very optimist person on the surge, but hey, I had them number 1, so I kind of have to stay on the bandwagon a little bit.
You are staying on the bandwagon. Maybe a little bit too long,
Maybe
but you
too
know
much.
what? There may be a new number 1, and I think that's what's really interesting here, right?
Yes.
Vancouver is 5-1. And,
Yes.
as much as they, I believe they took down Brampton as well, if I believe so.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, see, I have a lot of games to catch up on. Sometimes it's hard to remember off the top of my head. But either way, this has kind of sparked a new conversation.
Absolutely.
Vancouver being 5-1, Brampton being 5-1. You start to think about this conversation. Are the Bandits the best team in the CBL right now?
Right now, yes. Absolutely. I think right now, absolutely. But again, I think this is Vancouver at their full potential, whereas I think Brampton and Winnipeg have yet to reach their full potential. So there's kind of that question, but Vancouver has looked so good, especially this past week. very much statement wins in their last couple games. So I think Vancouver is absolutely the best team in the league right now. Will that change over the course of the season? Absolutely. But right now, I think they are the best team. So if they stay, playing how they are, I think they will, come out of the first in the West. However, I do see a dip down the line. I think this might be their peak regular season form right now. But I could see them losing a couple costly games. But again, their offense, it has been so well. They're putting up near 100 points consistently per game. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really say too much about that, right?
Yeah. It feels really like I agree with you. I feel like, everybody else isn't at their full potential right now when you think of
Yeah.
Brampton and Winnipeg. That could change things. I feel like Scarborough's pretty much at their potential. So we'll see how
Yes.
that changes. Like I said, like that kind of feels like the top four group right now. And how that changes, nobody really knows right now. But I agree with what you said. Like I feel like that can be the only downfall to Vancouver, right? Is maybe they stop looking at, maybe if they face Brampton again and they don't play as well because they think, well, they go back to without Jameer Nilsson Jr., right? That could probably throw a wrench into things. But I agree with you. Like, if their lineup looks stacked, they just kept adding people. And right now, I'm like, you start to look at this Vancouver roster, it was totally different than it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you start to look at that to be like, okay, maybe that loss against Edmonton isn't so much of a bad thing, right? When you think
Yeah.
that team was just so different. Jalen House was playing his second game.
Well, yeah, and that's like
I think it's changed the
put them
conversation.
we put them so I think that was kind of like how they flew off of our radar for so long because they
Yeah.
lost that first game. I was kind of like, a little bit stunned and I just never kind of thought about that. But now they've just put themselves right back in here and it's
Yeah.
like you have to recognize that. So
100%. 100%.
that is all for our free version of the National Rundown. If you enjoyed that, go subscribe to our Insiders portion. For only $2.99 a month, you can get our debates, news, headlines, and more. So make sure you go do that ASAP, and we will see you in the next one.